You're watching Radioactive Interviews right here on YouTube. My name is Victoria. With me right now, I got Chris Biersack. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm great, Victoria. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the show today. And for people watching at home that maybe don't know who you are Andy Biersack's dad from Blackville Brides. Um, I just want to start off the interview by bringing up the point that, obviously you are on Twitter and you're very involved in the BVB Army community on Twitter. Do you ever get people that like comment to that are like, yeah, you're not actually related to Andy? Because there's so many people that have like either like their first name and then like the last name of Biersack, Black, or like Six, right? So like people don't necessarily know if you're actually related or not.
Yeah, that happened quite frequently. And then I would try to like inform somebody about like if they were saying something that wasn't exactly right, or I just wanted to impart a little more information, or kind of drive the narrative in the right direction. I would say something, and then they would say, "Well, what do you know about it?" I've been a fan for X amount of years, and I'd be like, "All right, you're right." No, actually, to be quite honest, I tried for a longest period of time to not make a big deal out of my account being Andy's dad, as much as I just wanted it to be a fan account. I don't know if you know this. Well, you probably do, because we've had direct messaging. But my Twitter account got hacked.
Mhm.
Not that probably about I don't know. I guess it was the 6th, the 2nd. I can't remember what day. It was in the early part of November, and they still don't have access to it. So I had like 100 and somewhere between 124 and 125,000 followers that I had accumulated over the 12 years that I had the Twitter account, and you've used it almost expressly as an account for Blackville Brides fans, and to share information about what Blackville or Andy Black was doing. And somebody hacked it, and I guess they hacked it because they wanted to be able to use the 120 some thousand followers to try to sell sketchy gaming equipment, because that's all they've tried to do up to
Yeah.
this point. And Twitter support doesn't seem to have any ability to rectify it. So I keep talking to them, and they keep telling me, well, you already have another account. And I'm like, yeah, and a totally different email address. You told me that's what I had to do. And then they keep saying, but it's under a CBSAC at blah, 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 which is my email address. And I'm like, that's the email address for this Twitter account.
Yeah.
So it gets to a point where you're just like, okay, the diehard fans, the ones that I talk to anyway, I can communicate with them pretty quickly, and then they share that the new account with the rest of the fans. So it was bad timing. It came right in the middle of the week,
Mhm.
for the first week of the album, and that's pretty much a really important time, particularly to the BVB Army and the what I call like the everyday diehard people that I talk to every day on Twitter. That's always a really important time, because we're trying everything we possibly can to encourage people to stream the album, to go out and purchase the album. We want the album to debut its first week at the highest chart position that it can.
Mhm.
And if people buy the album, is great the second week, the third week, the fourth week. But television, and particularly late night talk shows and a show like Saturday Night Live, they the appearances and guest appearances by bands are driven by hit record. And if we sell a lot of albums for the band, or we buy a lot of albums for the band, but we don't get them a high charting album, we don't get the same level of recognition as we would if we did that. So that's why there's a group of people out there, and I'd say a group is probably underestimating. It's a relatively large group of people that I have been communicating with, that are fans of the band for the last 12 years, who
Mhm.
follow me, and then God love them, they kind of spread the message for me when I have some information that I want to get out there. Obviously, bands got their own Twitter, and the Dan Surf is running the Blackville Brides Twitter account, and when we've got fan pages and everything else. But there are a couple of people in particular. Ruth is one of those people. If you know the
Yeah.
Hearts to Heart show,
Yeah.
I asked Ruth if she would be interested in hosting that, because initially I was asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, I'd like to be able to contribute to it, and I'd like to be able to help coordinate it. But I didn't feel like a fan podcast or a fan YouTube show should be hosted by Andy's dad.
Right.
I felt like it's got to be organic. It has to grow from the fans. And I also felt like I can, if they want me to come on and answer questions about stuff, I'm happy to do that anytime. But I'm really excited to see other fans on the show. I'm really excited to see the band members will be appearing on the show in the future. So those are the kind of things that I'm more interested in personally than seeing my ugly mug on there. And unfortunately for you, you're having it on your show that you get some views, and I hope it doesn't detract people. But yeah, that's kind of the be all and end all of that. I definitely have people who, and that makes sense. I have people who don't think I'm Andy's dad, and even when other people tell them, and that's fine too. We're all just fans, really. It doesn't have any, there's really no, I don't try to laud some kind of special privileges over somebody because the guys in the band, or because I was there from the very beginning and basically was the band's de facto manager and merch salesman and everything else when it first started. I was a dad, and I, like every dad who has a kid who plays sports, or a dad whose kids are in plays, or, parents or whatever, I just did what I thought was best, just like my wife did, to try to help support Andy's dreams. And one of those things was to, sell the merch and drive the U-Haul to the next gig. And, I'm sure my story is no different than thousands, if not millions, of rock and roll parents who have done the same things.
Yeah. And do you ever find it kind of like overwhelming with like you being on Twitter and so many people knowing who you are on Twitter? Like, do you ever have people that was ever overwhelming with people like jumping on the opportunity to try like get you to tell Andy something, or like anything like that?
Yeah, I had some of that. And a lot of it was because I was at the beginning of Twitter. I didn't really understand how it worked. And I was following a lot of people. And then when they would get in my DMs, they would literally want me to communicate a message to Andy or the other band members, like leave my DMs and say, can you tell such and such this? Or can you ask them to do this? Or can you have them do, including things like, give me a shout out at this show, or say happy birthday to me at this show, or, just a lot of things. And it's not that I've always tried to be as helpful as I could. And there's a lot of things that people do ask me in the DMs that I'll get them the information as soon as I get it, just like I do in Twitter. If you've ever seen my, my primary account, which is I'm still locked out of, which is the Beers and Bats account on Twitter, but also the new one, Ghost Who Haunts. I do my best if somebody has a question, or they're just asking a general question to the BVB Army. If I know the answer, or I can get a link pretty quick, I just send it to them, without any fanfare or anything. I just send it to them. Some people know that it's Andy's dad. Some people don't. I don't really, again, it's not about that. It's about, if you're interested in buying something, if you're interested in ordering an album, you want to get a vinyl, you want to know where the t-shirt came from, wherever it is, and I can get you that link right away, human nature says that you're a lot more likely to buy it or order than you are if you have to go out and try to find it on your own. Because there's a lot of other things that you might grab your attention at that point in time. And first and foremost, my interest, obviously, for my son is this is his livelihood. This is his business. So the fans, the diehard fans in particular, who bought multiple copies of the album in various formats, whether it be in the CD, the vinyl, or even the cassettes, which are kind of funny. All of that stuff is more beneficial to Andy and his bandmates than the fans really know. I know a lot of people are like, well, I streamed it and everything. That's great. I do too. I listen to it on Spotify or YouTube Music all the time because I like the streaming numbers to go up. But realistically, it's not just the money that they get from selling records. They don't get that much from that. It's the ability to raise the bar with regard to how people treat and respect them in the industry when you have a record that is high on the Billboard charts or high in other charts, whether it be in the UK, other countries, or whatever. That's really important. And I don't think the fans always understand that. But there are some fans out there, and I'm not going to, I'm sitting here with 20 copies of the CD and 3 cassettes sitting on a table in front of me. And I'll give those out to friends and family for Christmas. Oh, sorry, bro. Already. I hope they're not watching this video because they now know. Yeah. And I don't, because I know how important it is for record sales. Now, does my 20 something copies, is that going to move the needle? No. But I know some other fans who probably bought a dozen copies and everything else. And if there's enough people who do that, and then the people who aren't as big a fan as some of the fans are, actually buy one copy, a band that has millions of fans would be able to sell more than, however many they sold in this first week. They'd be able to get that number 1 record. They'd be able to get that top 5 record that's eluded them their whole career. They have another Billboard charting album. It did well. It'll do well in the second week. One of the reasons that it's not going to do as well in the first week is because all of the albums that they sold on tour, the CDs that they sold on tour, that were they signed the jackets and they actually sold them the entire week after the record went on sale, and they sold like 1,500 copies or more of that. I think there might have been some vinyls involved in that too that they signed. None of those counted towards their record sales for the first week because apparently all of those sales had to be certified and authenticated. Well, if you're Jesse the merch guy and you're on a tour that's a tin can traveling around the country, you're not in some office. How are you going to do that? So you got to send it back to the label. And then there's a lot of things that people don't understand. Amazon, there's a bunch of pre-orders that people made with Amazon, and Amazon doesn't count or scan their stuff until they ship it. Not when you pre-order it, which is when the band should count for the band for their sales. I mean, there was albums that people ordered from Amazon weeks and potentially months ahead of time that they didn't actually ship until the second week. So those sales count in the second week. They don't count in the first week. So yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that I was excited about the chart position. I'm also not going to say that I'm disappointed, because ultimately the band and the fans represented themselves well. People went out and supported the band, streamed the hell out of it. I think there was 24 million streams of the album in the first week on the different platforms. So clearly people are listening to this album. And I don't know if you've seen the reviews, Victoria, on this, but by and large, I've yet to see one negative review. I've seen lukewarm, but I've never, and I saw a website or a podcast that has never said a positive thing about Black Veil Brides in the 12 years that the band has been out there recording, or the 11 years, including Andy's albums. Have never said a positive word. And their podcast, and the guys are intelligent guys. I'm not going to say that. They just had for some reason, they just didn't like Black Veil and they didn't like Andy, and it never gave up. They would, kind of act like Black Veil was a joke, which, okay, I don't really understand that, but everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But those guys said, this is the best album of 2021 so far. There's only a month and a half left to go in 2021. So that's a pretty good statement. Yeah.
And like you said, like not seeing a bad review. I haven't really seen bad reviews. I've seen like more comments where it's like, oh, the Phantom Tomorrow is too much kind of like Wretch and Divine, or it's not enough like old Black Veil Brides. But like, to me,
I think it's a matter of taste. I think that the band's biggest album to date was Wretched and Divine. And so that a lot of people obviously like that. I don't think that I don't think the two albums are all that similar, other than they give a nod to Shadow's Die from Wretched and Divine, with Shadow's Rise in The Phantom. But any band that has the level of string symphony music, that because of Jinx and how many different stringed instruments he can play, and in particular his violin play, any band that has that doesn't utilize that is foolish. So they went from Wretched and Divine to a pure rock album with Bob Rock, the guy who produced the Black Album from Metallica, and there wasn't any violin in it, and from pure metalhead rock dudes, they liked that album. Okay. Yeah. But I don't know if the Black Veil fans liked the self-titled album or Veil, which also was kind of subdued. I don't think that they liked it as much as they like Wretched and Divine in this album, because Black Veil is about that. They're about bigger than life. They're about putting like this world out there that you almost feel like you're listening to the soundtrack of a Tim Burton Batman movie, or Edward Scissorhands, or whatever the fuck. Pardon me, sorry for
it's okay. It's okay.
Okay. That's, I think, comes with being a part of a fan of Black Veil. I think you want that. That's what in fact, that's what the from that podcast said. No, I'm not gonna give their name because I'm still mad at them. But at any rate, it was nice to finally hear people who, again, are intelligent. I know they know their stuff. We just disagree on Andy Black records and Black Veil Brides records up to now, as far as the quality of those and the value of those.
Yeah, well, and to me, like, there's a good mix on the album, because I find like Kill the Hero and The Wicked One are kind of more of your earlier Black Veil Brides days, and then you have like Shadow's Rise that is kind of like Wretched and Divine. So like you are pulling inspiration from other things, but to me, all around the album is like a great album and has a good mix of everything in it.
Yeah, it's one of those albums, and I said this, I heard it before they pushed it back to October. I had heard it was ready. There were CDs were produced and were sitting in a warehouse that were ready to be sent out, but not enough could be produced, not enough, and they couldn't get the vinyls. And there was a lot of things that, being a Black Veil fan, you want all the tchotchkes, for lack of a better term. You want all the cool things that go with it. You want the merch and it's just a part of being a fan of this band. When you have a band that has a image that the fans kind of grasp onto and say, that's my band. I know, because I was a big fan of Alice Cooper. When I was growing up, I was a big fan of Kiss and Motley Crue a little bit later on. Those were bands that were huge image bands, and that was a part of identifying with them. And I think it's the same. I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but as Black Veil fans, I think a lot of the fans, that's kind of one of the things that, for lack of a better term, they kind of say, that's my band, that's my heart, that represents me.
Yeah, and like, just as the concept record as a whole, how do you like it? Because for me, like you had mentioned with all the merch and stuff, like I personally love all that stuff. The music video series that they had an action figure, and then they had the comic book series and the podcast and all that. Like, just as a whole, I really like it, and I just would like get your thoughts on the whole story of the record and just everything to go with it.
I think you really hit on a good point there, which is they try to hit every medium that they possibly can, because they're fans too of bands. And Andy in particular is a fan of the school of Kiss, who had pretty much every possible medium you can imagine for their fans to enjoy. Same with the Misfits. You can't turn around without seeing that Fiend Skull someplace. That's just the way it is. And Andy's friends with Jerry, and the guys in the Misfits, in particular with Jerry and he used to be his son used to be in the band. Jerry's son, Jerry Jr., was also in the band when they had oh God, who I can't remember the guy. I'm drawing a blank on who the guitarist was at the time. He used to be Des Cadena, who used to be in Black Flag, was in the Misfits when Jerry was the front man for the band and singing. And Jerry would be sending us prototypes of action figures and different things that they were thinking about coming out with that they hadn't come out with yet, because he knew Andy was so much into that kind of stuff and he wanted to get Andy's opinion. This was before Andy was fully enmeshed in Los Angeles. He had lived there. Andy was just a kid here in Cincinnati with a band, and he was a big Misfits fan. So now I see a lot of those elements with Black Veil. I just see Black Veil obviously is a contemporary band. They don't sound anything like any other hard rock band, any of their peers. And when they first started, one of the things that I kept telling people was they would say, "Oh, he doesn't sound like a metal singer. I don't think he sounds like a metal singer." And I'd say, "Yeah, he sounds like Billy Idol singing a metal song." And that's his style. He's a crooner, for lack of a better term. And I guess you got to get used to it, but it works for them. And he's getting better and better with every record that he puts out. He's become a really good singer. I think that, I've talked to other people about it, and the consensus with the people that I've talked to is, holy shit, Andy's voice and his vocals, he's really found who he is as a singer, as a frontman.
Yeah. And do you think like Andy going to do like his solo albums had any effect on his progress of singing now?
Yeah, I think that if there wasn't I think primarily if there wasn't a Ghost of Ohio, I don't know that this album sounds as good as it does. I know people think that one doesn't have anything to do with the other, but if I think you hear the growth in Andy's vocals on the Ghost of Ohio and the things that he did and tried to do on that album, you can clearly hear that kind of transfer over to the Fan of Tomorrow. I love the story of the Fan of Tomorrow. Again, I've been living with this thing with him for, since 2019. And, when he came up with it, he emailed the original drawings to Amy and I and said, "This is what I'm thinking about doing." And then he called us on the phone and we talked about it and everything else. That's the kind of relationship that we have. It's really, it's very, it warms my heart to know that my son cares so much about, our opinion on things before he does things. Not in a way that he can't do things without our approval, because that's not really the way it is. A lot of times he'll show us things, but also because he trusts that our instincts, and he knows that if I didn't think something was quite right or I had a question about it, I would ask it. I wouldn't just let it go and blow smoke up his wazoo. There's a lot of parents, and I've talked about this in interviews that I've done in the past. There's a lot of parents who don't have the ability or don't want to tell their kids or ask their kids, "Why are you doing this?" or what's the reason for this? Can you explain this to me? Or, even being, I don't want to say critical, but being at least reasonable. And when somebody says something, letting them know that, well, maybe it would be better if you tried this, or maybe it would sound better if this happened, or explain to me why you want to do that. Andy's always been open to any of that stuff, because when he started out as a young kid, he was smart enough to freaking have me video record him performing. I'm putting air quotes up there, but because he wanted to learn and he wanted to get better, and he figured that the only way to do that as a young kid who couldn't go in bars at the age of 13 or 14 when he first started playing guitar and trying to write songs and everything, the only way to get better was to practice and rehearse. And when his time finally came, when he formed his first band when he was 15, he was much more prepared to play in bars and clubs than he would have been if he'd have tried to do it at 13 or 14, where, if you're in a boy band, you can do that but you can't in a hard rock band, which is all Andy ever wanted to do, hard rock or a punk band. They're not going to accept you at 13. So you have to kind of have that you got to have that mentality going in, that everything you do isn't going to be perfect. It's rock and roll, and people are going to tell you that you suck, and they're going to boo you, and they're going to, especially with Andy, because you think about his band. He was 15 years old or 16 playing in bars and clubs in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And number one, he was wearing makeup. Okay. Nobody in those bands that were like screamo bands, where everybody was like doing like this big stance and they call it a crab core.
Yeah.
No doing that stuff. And I used to be, obviously I was involved with it, and I used to be on the side of the stage, and the other bands that they would play with would all mock them and make fun of them because they had makeup on and everything. And they used to have these giant bride like mannequins with on the sides of the stage, like ghosts, but with bridal outfits on that were covered in soot or they look like that. Mm-hmm. And they'd have them on stage, and they'd have anything else props that they could think of, and lights and smoke, what I call it, fog machines and floodlights and everything else. And these other bands would be looking at them like, what are you doing, man? That's not how we do it. Everybody be coming on there with their jorts and their, looking down at their shoes and just like running in place or whatever you want to call it. And then here's Andy, and he's like doing, Billy Idol or Generation X or Social Distortion or 69 Eyes, whatever these bands were that he was really into, Murder Dolls. He'd be doing covers and then his own originals and doing some Misfit songs. And he'd be like doing this horror rock stuff at a time that nobody else was doing it when he was 16 years old. And he would have guys in his band that were older than him, guys that had graduated high school. He was only like a sophomore or sophomore when he formed the band. And he would put their makeup on for him, because they know these guys didn't know how to do this. And he would give them his clothes for them to wear, and it was kind of a carousel of band members for a long period of time. But that's just the nature of this. Anybody who's in a band or is trying to get in a band.
Yeah.
It's not like you form a band with 5 people or 4 people and that's your band for the rest of your life. You're going to, by the time you make it in music, on average, almost everybody's going to either be in 3 or 4 bands that have 4 or 5 different members, or you're going to have your band, and your band's going to have about 15 to 20 members when it's all said and done. When he got to Hollywood, and then people were saying he has so many band members, it was like, yeah, he was a 15-year-old. You didn't start a band and had a record contract, and then they had multiple band members. He was a 15-year-old who moved to Hollywood when he was 18. And of course, he's going to have many band members by the time if he first gets some kind of national recognition or attention, because he wasn't but 18 or 19 by that time. So that's just, that's the narrative. The narrative is that he stole Nikki Sixx's name, which is silly, because in the days when Andy was coming up, everybody had a MySpace name. You brought that up at the beginning, how everybody had their name plus Biersack, their name plus Black, their name plus Six, right?
Yeah.
Back in the MySpace days, kids did that too. And Andy liked the Misfits, and he liked Motley Crue, and he liked Kiss and everything else. And he called himself Andy Six, but he called himself Andy Six because his sports number was number 6 or 26, which is his birthday. And I used to tease him about being Andy Six. But he put when he made his MySpace user ID, he put the 2 X's on it. Now, when you're a kid trying to sell your band to as many people as you can at that age, and you have shows and everything else, and you're putting info out there and trying to get people to come see you, they're seeing you as Andy Six, Sixx. And so that's who he kind of became. But it wasn't like he was trying to co-opt Nikki Sixx's name and confuse people that he was Nikki Sixx's son, this is one of the most ridiculous things ever. Number one, I can promise you, I have as much of an ego as anybody, and I would never want Nikki Sixx to get the credit for what Amy and I did to help to raise Andy. So Nikki Sixx has got his own fame. He's got his own thing. But Andy has nothing to do with Nikki Sixx.
Yeah.
As it turned out, Nikki is was a champion of Black Veil Brides. He's a good guy, and he said some nice things about the band in the past. I'm a big Motley Crue fan. Went to go see him on their quote unquote farewell tour with Amy. We like Andy's a friend, as he knows Mick Mars. So I grew up a Kiss fan, but I kind of gravitated to Motley Crue in my later teens and early college years because they were a similar type of band, a little more aggressive than Kiss had become by that point. So I have nothing but love for Motley Crue and Nikki Sixx and everybody in that band. But it was funny to me that people were acting like Andy was trying to use Nikki Sixx's name. And there was an actual interview where they asked Nikki Sixx about it. And they said, is he your son? And he actually had a quote that said, no, my son would be more original than to use my name. And I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, immediately after that, Andy changes his name on the record liner. He's already going to do it anyway, but he made sure that it was clear that he was Andy Biersack.
Yeah.
And and now of course people go, well, is he Andy Biersack or is he Andy Black? We doesn't even know what his name is. Is it Andy Sixx? His name's Andy Biersack. Okay. It's a solo project named Andy Sixx because Andy Black, because he wanted to differentiate that from Black Veil Brides.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, well, Black Veil Brides doesn't all their songs sound similar or they sound the same, or was like, yeah, because Andy does Andy Black. He doesn't, if he wanted to have an album that sounded completely different, he's already done that twice. Listen to that. That's why Black Veil sounds similar, because it's the same five guys trying to make the same kind of music for the fans.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, maybe you'll like Andy Black. That's one of the things. There's a lot of things that I read and see and hear over the years and everything that kind of don't make any sense to me. I used to get upset about it. I really did. And I think you probably see I'm passionate about it, but I used to get upset about it because I thought it was really unfair. But over the years, I've just become kind of numb to it. And now I just find it amusing. I will forward certain things to friends of mine, people that I've met in the fandom, the ones I'm really close to, and then we'll get a chuckle out of all that stuff. And that's about the best. That's really all you can do. You can't fight a battle online anymore. That's a losing cause, because people take one little thing that you say completely out of context and they run with it, and then you become the worst person in the history of the world. And you can't win.
Yeah. And as far as like the rock scene goes from the past 10 years from when Black Veil started, how has it kind of changed in your opinion? Because there used to be like kind of these award shows as well, like the Kerrang Awards and the Alt Press and the Golden Gods. And there's not really that anymore. And even like I find magazines aren't what they used to be. So like in your opinion, how has that kind of changed?
I think that the pandemic has had a huge impact on rock media because they're not putting out physical copies of magazines like they used to. I think the information is still there, and some of the magazines are now just literally publishing digitally. I would assume that they're doing that with the help or the assistance of some advertising that is paying for them to be able to make the magazine. But we used to, Andy was on the cover of Kerrang magazine one year. I think it was 2014, 2013, 2014. He was on the cover in some fashion or form, either his name or his picture. And on many occasions, Black Veil was the featured artist on the cover, 26 times out of 52 issues. So they were somewhere on the cover half of the issues that year. Now, you know that's never going to happen again. Just like Andy's been on the cover of Alternative Press magazine with Black Veil Brides. It was Andy Black, I believe 12, 13 times now. Like the old record was Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, who was on the cover 8 or 9 times. And within a certain very short period of time, Andy just blew by that and continued. Now they're owned by a different company. And that company is, I don't really think, is very fond of what we call the scene staples. You know, the bands that I consider Andy's peers, the ones that they kind of all came up together, whether they were friendly with each other or they got along or they didn't, or their fans like each other or not. There's certain bands that I go, yeah, that's the Warped Tour world that Andy and I grew up with. And it would be bands like Bring Me the Horizon, Falling in Reverse, Motionless in White, Pierce the Veil, All Time Low. Every award ceremony that I ever went to, and I went to all of the APMAs, those would be the bands that we would see. And they would all be, and they would be performing, that would be the bands that you would, the difference was that outside of possibly Motionless, the other bands were all like really close and all friendly with each other. And Black Veil was the pariahs. Nobody would talk to them. Everybody would make fun of them. And I was in bars. People didn't know I was Andy's dad. And some bands would be mocking them and making fun of them. And they would be mad because Black Veil would win a lot of awards because they were fan voted awards.
Yeah.
And it's Black Veil came from nowhere for a lot of these bands. They were just, and they were a gimmick, and they were this and they were that, and they couldn't play, and it's a joke and everything else. And here we are 10 years, 11 years later, and they're like a cockroach you can't kill. They just won't go away. And if there's anything that bothers these other bands that hated them, it's that they just won't go away.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, but I like all those bands. I've bought every band that I mentioned. I bought their album, every single one of those bands. I've always, because I like to hear what else is going on in the scene. But I've yet to hear a positive comment from the vast majority of the peers of Black Veil Brides. If you know those guys, Andy, Jake, Jinx, CC, they go out of their way to say kind words and positive things and promote other people's albums and everything else. And nobody wants to do that with Black Veil.
Yeah.
My theory on that is that that there is a certain level of fear that if people discover that Black Veil is actually a good band, that it could change things. So it's easier just to keep them in they're kind of a gimmick and they really can't play and blah, blah, blah. Because realistically, I challenge them all to listen to the Phantom Tomorrow and tell me that that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can listen to any album from Black Veil, but in particular, the Phantom Tomorrow, which is what I consider to be the ultimate lineup that the band's had in its history, because they now have 5 fully contributing members, and in particular 4, if you want to just call Andy a front man or a singer, but 4 classically trained or trained musicians, multi-instrumental guys, particularly in the guitar area. Every one of those guys play all kinds of different instruments. And CC is an incredible drummer, obviously, and he can play any style of drum as well. But Jinx and Lonnie can literally play almost anything. That's how talented those guys are. Yeah. So, and Lonnie is and I knew this when I don't know if you saw the Andy Black the Ghost of Ohio tour. But I knew right away when I heard Lonnie on doing the backups that he was, I mean, he gets it.
Mhm.
He understands harmony, and he understands where the backup vocal needs to lie in the, to mesh with the lead. If you don't know that, you just are literally singing over the top of the singer,
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a long answer to a very short question. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, but I find it really interesting. Like, what do you think? This is just the last question here. What do you think makes BVB fans stand out from any other fan base? Because, like, for me, the amount of videos that I see of people doing, whether it's like the makeup and war paint or like art or guitar covers, music covers of anything, like I just feel like they're just different compared to all the other fan bases.
Yeah, I've always called them the new creatives. In fact, I probably didn't coin that term. I think that Black Veil Bride's artists for most of their albums and all of their early albums, Richard Villa, I believe that he coined that phrase, the new creatives, and that always stuck with me. That the artistic ability, the creativity, it makes sense because Black Veil fans are very not only are they artistically inclined, but they are very much caring, compassionate kind of people. They rally around each other. They support each other. They follow and like each other's videos. They talk to each other. If you're a fan of the band, they want to talk to you. It's very much of a community. And that's what Andy tried for all these years, is what he's tried to foster, is that you may not have where you live in your little town or wherever you are, or your group of friends or your school, because Andy didn't have that. He was kind of the weirdo kid wearing a Misfits shirt, and a eyeliner and everything else in a suburban Cincinnati, small town Cincinnati suburb. And he was ostracized for that. He was called, well, if you've seen the Knives and Pens video, that is historically accurate. That kid in the Knives and Pens video was Andy in middle school. And so, that I think resonates with people. I think that's why that video initially caught people, because bullying and a lot of things that people have to deal with, they feel that stuff all the time. And they're trying so hard to be liked. And they wind up, I see this on social media, not to go on a tangent here, but I see this a lot of times on social media, people trying so hard to get a positive comment on a thing that they say, that they literally betray what they enjoy or like just so somebody else will like them.
Yeah.
If you like Harry Potter, God love you. Just fucking say it. Who cares? Nobody out there is important enough for you to betray or say you don't like something because you think that it's not cool. Literally, when you grow up, you will realize that being cool is such a not a thing in your adult life. You have so many other things that you gotta worry about, concern yourself with, that just literally having time to enjoy yourself, to immerse yourself in something that makes you happy, or to spend time with your family, your kids, whatever it is, that's what matters. Rando strangers on the internet who are going to give you a like or say good job, who are the taste police for music or whatever, that is so irrelevant. It means nothing. So many kids got caught up for a period of time in the whole Black Veil Bride sucks, they're the worst band in the world, they're the shittiest band, blah, 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 that 98% of them turned out to be sheep who never even listened to the band, never heard them, but just that became the narrative. But the people who did listen to them, it became very personal to them. And they stuck with the band, and they became even more energized and more excited by that, because they knew something that other people refused to know or to listen to. And they galvanized, and they talked to each other, and they knew something. And Andy always talks about that. It may not be easy, but when you know in your heart that something's good or something's enjoyable to you and something feels right, and then over time it proves out to be you were right, there is no greater feeling than that. None.
Yeah.
Because it's something that you did that was intrinsically important to you or that you liked, that you did not give into. You didn't tell somebody else, yeah, I don't like them. I used to like them when I was 12 years old, but now I'm an adult. Now I'm a grown up and I don't listen to that anymore. Bullshit. That's bullshit. Okay? Stop, as they used to say, stop fronting. It's just bullshit. You're still listening to him. You're still, because if you didn't listen to him, you didn't care about him, you wouldn't be on social media tweeting about him again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Chris.
Happy to. Thank you. I appreciate all the work that you do to your covers. I love your bass covers. I always check them out whenever I can. I want to check out your band. So share anything that you have about your music with us, and we'll make sure other people can hear it. And also thank you for all the support, love, and the promotion that you give to Black Veil Brides, to Andy and his bandmates. It really means a lot, and we really appreciate it. To anybody who is watching this, I just want to say the same thing. I want to let everybody know that especially the folks who are the diehard fans who I talk to every single day on social media, particularly on Twitter, you make my day every single day. I'm retired now. I do some work as a consultant, but for the most part, I have more time to review and look at stuff. And the smiles that I get, the happiness that I get from the people who are so kind and generous and supportive of Black Veil makes this old man feel pretty good.